I never thought I'd be standing in my living room watching my grandmother try to apologize for years of cruelty and manipulation. But there she was on a humid September evening in Phoenix, her usually perfect silver hair slightly disheveled, and her hands trembling as she spoke words I never expected to hear from her lips. And as I stood there with my family around me, I couldn't help but think back to how it all started when I was just 9 years old, and the world seemed so much simpler. Before I understood that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can hurt you in ways you never imagined possible. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my family almost fell apart because of one woman's prejudice and manipulation, and how we somehow found our way back to each other. Though the scars still remain like invisible threads connecting us to a past we can't quite forget, no matter how hard we try to move forward. It began on a sweltering July afternoon in 2010 when my grandmother Rose first showed her true colors at a family barbecue in our backyard, where the mesquite trees provided little shade from the Arizona sun, and the air conditioning units hummed constantly, trying to keep up with the desert heat that seemed to seep into everything, including our relationships with each other. I was sitting at the picnic table with my younger sister Emma, who was 7 at the time, and my brother Michael, who had just turned 11 when Grandma Rose approached me with that look on her face that I would come to know so well over the years, a mixture of fake concern and barely concealed disgust that made my stomach twist into knots, even though I didn't fully understand why at the time. "Sarah, honey," she said loud enough for everyone to hear as she pinched the skin on my upper arm between her thumb and forefinger. "You're getting so skinny. It's not healthy for a young girl to be this thin. You need to eat more, or you'll never find a husband when you grow up. No man wants a woman who looks like she might blow away in the wind." The words stung more than the pinch, and I remember looking down at my plate of potato salad and hot dogs, wondering what was wrong with me that made my grandmother say such cruel things, when all I had done was exist in the body I was born with, a body that reflected my mother's Mexican heritage with its naturally slender frame and olive skin that darkened in the summer sun. My mother Maria was in the kitchen at the time preparing more food for the endless stream of relatives who always seemed to show up at our family gatherings. And my father James was manning the grill, laughing with his brothers about something that had happened at work, completely oblivious to the way his mother was making me feel 2 inches tall. For context, you need to understand that my mother came to America from Guadalajara when she was 22 years old, with dreams of becoming a teacher, and she met my father at Arizona State University, where they both were studying education and fell in love despite the cultural differences that would later become ammunition in my grandmother's war against our family. My siblings and I inherited a blend of features from both parents, with Michael taking after Dad with his sandy brown hair and blue eyes, while Emma and I looked more like Mom with our dark hair and brown eyes. Though Emma's were lighter, almost hazel in certain light, which Grandma Rose would later use to claim she was the most American-looking of us all. But that day at the barbecue was just the beginning of what would become a pattern of behavior that would escalate over the years, always disguised as concern or helpful advice, but really designed to chip away at our self-esteem and create divisions within our family that would take years to heal if they ever truly healed at all. The comments about my weight continued at every family gathering and soon expanded to include criticism of my posture, the way I walked, the clothes I wore, and even the way I laughed, which Grandma Rose said was too loud and unladylike for a proper young woman who wanted to be taken seriously in this world. When I was 13, she gave me a diet book for Christmas wrapped in shiny paper with a big bow on top, and inside the cover she had written a note that said, "I hope this helps you become the beautiful granddaughter I know you can be if you just try a little harder to take care of yourself, because beauty comes from discipline and self-control." I remember running to my room and crying into my pillow while my mother held me and whispered in Spanish that I was perfect just the way I was, and that some people's hearts were too small to hold all the love they should have for their families. But we couldn't let their smallness make us smaller too. The situation took a darker turn when I was 15, and my mother finally told me the full extent of what had been happening behind closed doors for years, the comments and actions that she had been shielding us from as best she could while trying to maintain peace in the family for my father's sake. She told me how Grandma Rose had been making racist comments since before we were born, sometimes pulling at the corners of her eyes to make them look more slanted and saying, "Look, Maria, now we're twins, isn't that funny? How we all look the same when we do this?" Or asking if the food my mother cooked contained dog meat. Because that's what those people eat, isn't it? My mother had endured years of being called exotic, like she was some kind of zoo animal, and having her English corrected even though she spoke it perfectly with only the slightest accent that came out when she was excited or upset, and being told that she was lucky my father had rescued her from whatever horrible life she would have had in Mexico. The worst part was that my father seemed completely blind to it all. Or maybe he just didn't want to see it because acknowledging his mother's behavior would mean having to choose between the woman who raised him and the woman he married, and that was a choice he wasn't prepared to make. Things got even more complicated when my father gave Grandma Rose a spare key to our house, supposedly for emergencies, but she interpreted this as an open invitation to come over whenever she pleased, which usually happened when we were all asleep or at school and work. We would come home to find things moved around subtly but noticeably enough to let us know she had been there, going through our drawers, our closets, our personal belongings, as if she had the right to inspect our lives and judge whether we were living up to whatever standards she had set in her mind. My mother's important documents would be shuffled through her jewelry box, rearranged, and sometimes we would find sticky notes with passive-aggressive comments like, "This would look better on someone with lighter skin," or "Maybe you should consider selling this and buying something more appropriate for an American home." The breaking point with the house key situation came when we discovered she had been going through our family computer, looking at our photos, our emails, our private communications, and had even printed out some of my mother's emails to her sister back in Mexico to share with her bridge club as examples of how foreigners never really assimilate. But even worse than the invasion of privacy was the physical evidence she left behind because Grandma Rose had reached an age where she needed certain assistance but was too proud to admit it. So she refused to wear the protective undergarments her doctor recommended, which led to accidents that she would try to clean up but never quite managed completely. Finding stains on our furniture became a regular occurrence, and the smell that lingered no matter how much we cleaned was a constant reminder that our home wasn't really ours, as long as she had access to it. But my father still refused to ask for the key back, saying we needed to be understanding of her age and situation. My brother Michael handled all of this by basically becoming invisible whenever Grandma Rose was around, disappearing into his room, or finding reasons to be at friends' houses because he had figured out early on that the best way to avoid her criticism was to avoid her altogether, which was a survival strategy I envied but couldn't quite master. Emma, on the other hand, took a different approach entirely because she had always been the rebellious one in our family, the child who questioned everything and pushed boundaries just to see how far they would bend before they broke. And when she turned 13, she decided that the way to deal with Grandma Rose was to become her favorite. It started small with Emma laughing at inappropriate jokes about our mother's accent or the way she pronounced certain words and agreeing when Grandma Rose said things like, "Well, at least you got the good genes, Emma. You could almost pass for a real American if it weren't for that hair which made my blood boil." But Emma just smiled and thanked her. Before long, Emma was actively participating in the criticism, making comments about Mexican food being too spicy or joking that she was glad she didn't inherit Mom's need to talk with her hands all the time, and each word felt like a betrayal not just of our mother, but of everything our family was supposed to represent. The situation escalated when Emma started going through our mother's personal documents and photographing them to send to Grandma Rose, including financial records, medical information, and private correspondence that was never meant to be shared with anyone outside our immediate family, let alone used as gossip fodder. When we moved to a new house across town, partly to get away from Grandma Rose's constant uninvited visits, Emma took it upon herself to have a new key made for her, without telling anyone until we discovered it the hard way, when we came home from a weekend trip to find Grandma Rose sitting in our living room going through our mail. I was 18 when everything finally exploded at Grandma Rose's 87th birthday party, which my father insisted one of us kids had to plan as a test of our devotion to family. Despite knowing how we all felt about her and threatening that whoever didn't step up would face serious consequences that he never quite specified, but implied would be severe, Emma came to me immediately after Dad laid down this ultimatum, batting her eyelashes and using the sweet voice she reserved for getting what she wanted, asking if I could plan the whole party, but let her take credit because she had so much going on with school and her social life, and it would really help her out just this once. Being the oldest daughter in a family means you learn early that sometimes the path of least resistance is the only path that keeps everyone from falling apart. So I agreed to plan every detail of the party while letting Emma take all the credit, because it was easier than fighting about it. And I was tired of fighting. I spent 3 days planning the perfect 4th of July themed birthday party, because that's when her birthday fell, and Grandma Rose was nothing if not patriotic to the point of xenophobia. So I decorated everything in red, white, and blue with American flag tablecloths and star-spangled banners, and even managed to time the party so we could watch the fireworks from the backyard. The menu was all American classics that I spent hours preparing from scratch, including BBQ ribs that I had marinating for 2 days potato salad made from my father's mother's recipe, before she passed coleslaw corn on the cob and apple pie that I made 3 times before getting the crust just right. Because I knew Grandma Rose would comment if it wasn't perfect. On the day of the party, I was up at 5 in the morning getting everything ready, setting up tables in the backyard, stringing lights, preparing food, and making sure every detail was exactly right. While Emma slept in until noon, then spent 2 hours getting ready while I sweated in the kitchen trying to keep everything on schedule. When the guests started arriving, Emma suddenly appeared in a sundress looking fresh and relaxed, while I was still in my cooking clothes with my hair pulled back and barbecue sauce under my fingernails. But I didn't have time to change because someone needed to keep managing the food and making sure everything ran smoothly. As soon as I brought out the ribs, Emma announced loudly, "Oh my God. Everyone look at this amazing spread I put together. I've been working on this for days to make sure Grandma's birthday was perfect, and I even made her favorite potato salad from scratch using the family recipe that took forever to get right." I just rolled my eyes and continued serving while listening to her elaborate on all the hard work she had supposedly done, even going so far as to make up stories about how she had to convince me not to serve Mexican food, because this was an American celebration, and we needed to honor Grandma Rose's heritage properly. My parents seemed to buy the act, or at least they pretended to. And Grandma Rose was practically glowing with pride as she praised Emma for being such a thoughtful granddaughter who really understood what family meant, unlike some people who seem to forget where they came from and who they should be loyal to. Everything might have been fine if Emma had stopped there, but she was on a roll and feeling confident with all the positive attention she was getting. So she decided to push things further with a comment that would change everything, and finally force our family to confront the poison that had been spreading through it for years. "You know, Grandma Emma said loud enough for everyone at the party to hear Sarah's been trying to keep me from doing things for you for years. She says she's the only one capable of taking care of you properly, and that Michael and I are too immature to understand what you really need, but I knew that was wrong, so I did all this anyway." The lie was so blatant, so obviously false, that I couldn't believe she had actually said it. But the damage was done, and I watched as my father's face turned red with anger, while Grandma Rose nodded knowingly as if this confirmed everything she had always suspected about me being a controlling, manipulative person who wanted to keep the family divided. My father didn't even question it. Didn't ask for my side of the story, just immediately stood up from the table and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises that would last for days, dragging me through the house while all our relatives watched in stunned silence as he took me upstairs to his study. I knew what was coming and tried to defend myself, saying, "Dad, please just listen to me for 1 second. I planned this entire party. Emma asked me to do it and let her take credit. I have the receipts from the grocery store. I have the decoration orders in my email. I can prove it, please. Just let me show you." He paused with his hand raised ready to strike, and for a moment I saw uncertainty in his eyes, like maybe some part of him knew the truth but didn't want to acknowledge it, because that would mean admitting that his mother had been right about our family being broken and dysfunctional all along. Instead of hitting me, he stormed back downstairs with me following on shaky legs that felt like they might give out at any moment, and confronted Emma in front of everyone, demanding to know if what I said was true, while she immediately burst into tears with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Through her fake sobs, Emma insisted that I was lying again, just like I always did, because I couldn't stand the thought of her doing something nice for Grandma Rose, and that I was jealous of their special relationship and trying to destroy it, because I was bitter and angry about not being the favorite anymore. Grandma Rose immediately jumped to Emma's defense, putting her arm around her and saying, "Your oldest daughter has always been jealous of poor Emma, dear. I've seen it for years, the way she tries to undermine this sweet girl at every opportunity. It's that Mexican blood in her. You know, it makes them sneaky and dishonest." The room went completely silent at her blatant racism, and even some of our relatives who usually stayed out of family drama looked uncomfortable, but my father still didn't say anything to defend us. Just stood there with his jaw clenched while my mother tried to speak up only to be immediately shut down. "That's not true," Maria started to say. But my father cut her off with, "Stay out of this. Maria, this is between my daughters and me, and I'll handle it the way I see fit." Which made my mother flinch and step back with that look of resignation I had seen too many times before when she realized fighting would only make things worse. I couldn't believe this was happening in my own home at a party I had spent days planning, While Emma sat there crying fake tears and getting comforted by everyone, while I stood accused of being a liar and a troublemaker, just for telling the truth about something so stupid and petty. Dad, I said, trying one more time. I literally spent 3 days planning this party. I made the shopping lists, I decorated everything, I cooked all the food, I have blisters on my hands from kneading dough for the pie crust. Look at them, and I held up my hands to show him the evidence, but he wouldn't even glance at them. Emma just cried harder. Wailing, she's only saying that because she's jealous that everyone likes my party. Better than anything she's ever done for Grandma. She's always been like this, trying to take credit for other people's work and making herself look better by making me look bad. My brother Michael tried to help, saying, "Dad, come on. I saw Sarah cooking all day yesterday, and this morning she's been in the kitchen since dawn. Emma didn't do anything except sleep late and get dressed." But Dad just held up his hand to silence him too. "Enough," he said in that tone that meant the discussion was over. "Sarah, you're grounded indefinitely. I'm sick and tired of your lies and your jealousy and your constant need to create drama in this family. Go to your room right now and don't come out until I tell you that you can." I stood there in shock, unable to process that this was actually happening, that my own father was punishing me for telling the truth, while my sister sat there smirking behind her fake tears, and my grandmother nodded approvingly, like this was exactly what she had been hoping would happen all along. Such a troublemaker. Grandma Rose said loud enough for everyone to hear, always has been since she was little. "I tried to warn you, James, but you wouldn't listen. And now look what she's become, a liar who can't stand to see her sister succeed at anything." As I walked upstairs to my room, I could hear the party resuming, with people comforting Emma and praising her for the wonderful job she had done, while discussing in hushed tones what a problem I was, and how difficult it must be for my parents to deal with such a difficult child. The next few weeks were some of the worst of my life, as I was confined to my room except for bathroom breaks and silent meals where I wasn't allowed to speak, while Emma was treated like a princess who had been terribly wronged by her jealous older sister, who couldn't accept that she wasn't the center of attention. My phone was confiscated, my laptop taken away, and I wasn't allowed to see friends or go anywhere except school, where I had to come straight home afterwards, while Emma got special privileges and rewards for being so brave and standing up to me and telling the truth about my supposed jealousy problem. She would walk past my room humming happily and sometimes stop to whisper through the door things, like, "Hope you're enjoying your punishment, Sarah. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to steal credit for my hard work." Or, "Grandma says she's never been prouder of me for finally standing up to you." I could hear Grandma Rose downstairs talking to my father about how she had always worried about my behavior, and how it was probably best to consider sending me away to a special school for troubled teens, where I could get the help I clearly needed before I destroyed the entire family with my lies. She would say things like, "I've seen programs that work wonders with difficult children like Sarah. They teach them discipline and respect and how to control their jealous impulses. It might be the best thing for everyone if she spent some time away from Emma, learning how to be a better person." Meanwhile, I was starting to receive messages from extended family members who had heard Grandma Rose's version of events and felt the need to weigh in with their opinions about my behavior, and how disappointed they were to hear that I had become such a problem for my poor parents who were just trying to raise us right. The worst part was that I couldn't defend myself because no one would listen. And the more I tried to explain what really happened, the more it seemed to confirm in everyone's minds that I was a compulsive liar who couldn't accept responsibility for my actions and needed serious intervention. My mother tried to help in small ways, bringing me extra food when Dad wasn't looking or sitting with me quietly while I did homework. But she was walking on eggshells too, afraid that defending me too strongly would make things worse for both of us in a house where Dad's word was law. Everything changed one night about 3 weeks into my punishment, when Michael decided he had seen enough of the injustice and took matters into his own hands in a way that would finally expose the truth and force our family to confront the lies that had been tearing us apart. He had been secretly recording conversations on his phone, including one where Emma admitted to her friend on FaceTime that she had tricked me into planning the party, and then lied about it because Grandma Rose promised to give her money for college if she helped put me in my place. The recording was crystal clear as Emma laughed about how easy it was to manipulate everyone, and how stupid I was for actually doing all the work while she got all the credit plus $1,000 from Grandma Rose as a reward for finally showing everyone what kind of person I really was. Michael also had screenshots of text messages between Emma and Grandma Rose planning the whole thing, including discussions about how to make the lie believable and what to say to make sure Dad would take Emma's side without questioning the story or asking for any proof. Armed with this evidence, Michael waited until dinner one night when the whole family was together and announced that he had something important to share. Then played the recordings and showed the screenshots while Emma's face went from smug to panicked as she realized she had been caught. The silence that followed was deafening as my father stared at the phone in Michael's hand, processing what he had just heard, while my mother's face showed a mixture of vindication and anger that I had never seen before. And Emma started crying again. But this time, the tears seemed real. Dad turned to Emma with a look of such disappointment that even I felt bad for her, and asked, "Is this true? Did you lie about the party? Did you and my mother plan this whole thing to frame your sister for something she didn't do just to hurt her?" Emma broke down completely sobbing that Grandma Rose had been telling her for years that I was the problem in the family, and that if they could just get me sent away, then everything would be better. And she believed it because she wanted to be special, and loved, and accepted. She admitted that she had been sending Grandma Rose information about our family for years, including photos of private documents and recordings of conversations, because Grandma Rose said it was important to keep track of what the Mexican influence was doing to our family values. The revelations kept coming as Emma confessed to making the spare key, giving Grandma Rose access to our new house, helping her go through our things, and even suggesting times when no one would be home so she could search for evidence of whatever conspiracy she believed my mother was involved in. My father finally found his voice and turned to his mother, who was sitting there with her mouth open in shock, either at being exposed or at Emma's betrayal of their plan, and asked, "How could you do this to my family? How could you turn my daughter against her own sister and mother?" Grandma Rose tried to defend herself, saying she was only trying to protect the family from influences that would destroy their American values, and that someone needed to make sure the children were raised properly, instead of being corrupted by foreign ideas and customs that had no place in this country. But her words fell on deaf ears as my father finally saw clearly what had been happening for years: the poison that his mother had been spreading through our family. The racism and manipulation that he had been too blind or too afraid to acknowledge because it came from someone he loved. He told her to leave immediately and not come back until she could apologize to everyone she had hurt, especially my mother, who had endured years of abuse in silence, and me, who had been falsely accused and punished for crimes I didn't commit while trying to hold our family together. Grandma Rose left in a huff, muttering about ungrateful children and how we would all regret this when we realized she was right. But the relief in the house was palpable, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted, and we could all breathe freely for the first time in years. The aftermath was complicated as our family tried to heal from years of manipulation and lies, with Emma going to therapy to understand why she had been so willing to betray us for the approval of someone who was using her and my parents, working to rebuild trust that had been shattered. I wish I could say that everything went back to normal after that. But the truth is that some wounds run too deep to heal completely. And while we learned to function as a family again, there were always going to be scars from what we had been through together and separately. Emma and I slowly rebuilt our relationship, though it took months of family therapy and individual counseling for her to understand the full extent of how she had been manipulated, and for me to forgive her for the betrayal that had nearly destroyed my relationship with my parents and my sense of self. My mother finally felt free to be herself in her own home, speaking Spanish when she wanted, cooking the food she grew up with, and sharing her culture with us without fear of criticism or judgment from someone who had no right to make her feel ashamed of who she was. My father had to confront his own complicity in allowing his mother's behavior to continue for so long, and the way he had failed to protect his wife and children from someone who should have loved and accepted us, instead of trying to tear us apart from the inside. Michael became something of a hero in our family story, the quiet one who had watched and waited and gathered evidence until the moment was right to expose the truth and save us all from a situation that was spiraling further out of control with each passing day. We cut off contact with Grandma Rose completely. And while some family members criticized us for it, saying we should forgive and forget because she was old and set in her ways, we knew that protecting ourselves and our mental health had to come first, no matter what anyone else thought. For months, we heard nothing from her, though occasionally relatives would mention that she was telling everyone who would listen that we had been brainwashed by my mother, and that someday we would realize our mistake and come crawling back begging for her forgiveness. Life continued, and we slowly found our new normal as a family that had survived something traumatic, but come out stronger on the other side, even if we were all a little more cautious, a little less trusting than we had been before we learned how deep betrayal could run. I graduated from high school with honors despite everything that had happened and was accepted to several colleges, ultimately choosing to stay relatively close to home at the University of Arizona because I had learned that family, despite all its complications, was worth being near even when it was difficult. Emma threw herself into her art, finding a way to express the complicated emotions she was dealing with through painting and sculpture that was both therapeutic for her and powerful for those who saw it, including several pieces about identity and belonging that won awards. Michael continued being Michael, steady and reliable and somehow untouched by the drama that had swirled around him, perhaps because he had found ways to protect himself emotionally that the rest of us hadn't learned, or perhaps because he was just built differently than his sisters. My mother flourished without the constant criticism and judgment, becoming more confident in her role as a teacher and community leader, even starting a support group for other immigrant women who were dealing with discrimination within their own families, which grew larger than she ever expected. My father spent a lot of time in reflection and therapy, working through his issues with his mother and his own unconscious biases that had allowed him to dismiss the racism and cruelty happening right in front of him for so many years, until it almost destroyed everything he claimed to value. Then one evening, about a year after we had cut off contact, the doorbell rang while we were having dinner and we all froze, because somehow we knew before my father even answered it that Grandma Rose would be standing on the other side of that door. I heard my father's sharp intake of breath and his shocked voice saying, "Mom, what are you doing here?" And I quickly texted Michael and Emma, who were upstairs, to come down because whatever was about to happen, we needed to face it together as a family. When I peered around the corner from the hallway, I barely recognized the woman standing on our porch because Grandma Rose looked smaller, somehow diminished, like the year without us had taken something essential from her and left her hollow in a way that was both satisfying and sad. Her usually perfect silver hair was slightly messy, and she wasn't wearing one of her typical formal outfits that she used like armor to intimidate and control, but instead had on a simple cardigan and slacks that made her look like what she was, an elderly woman who had lost her family. "I came to talk," she said in a voice that lacked all of its usual sharpness and command. "If that's all right with you, James. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for a few minutes of your time. Of all your time, if the family is willing to hear what I have to say." My father hesitated, clearly torn between protecting us from more hurt and some lingering sense of obligation to the woman who had raised him before, finally stepping aside to let her in, though his body language made it clear this was not a welcome visit but a reluctant allowance. We all gathered in the living room, the same room where so many cruel words had been spoken over the years, and sat in awkward silence while Grandma Rose stood in the center, looking at each of us in turn, as if seeing us for the first time, or maybe seeing us as we really were. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation." She began, her voice trembling slightly. "And I've realized some things about myself that aren't very flattering, things I should have realized years ago, but was too proud and too stubborn to admit even to myself." She turned to my mother first, and I saw my mom's body tense as if preparing for another attack. But instead, Grandma Rose said, "Maria, I've been cruel to you from the moment James brought you home, treating you like an outsider, like a threat when you've been nothing but good to my son and grandchildren. I was raised to believe certain things about people who were different from me." She continued, "And I never questioned those beliefs. Never thought to examine why I felt threatened by your presence in my son's life, when all you did was love him and give him 3 beautiful children who I should have cherished." The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming and the distant sound of fireworks from somewhere in the neighborhood, as we all waited to see where this was going, whether it was genuine or just another manipulation designed to get her back into our lives. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Grandma Rose said, surprising me because the woman I knew never admitted to being wrong about anything. "But I need you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, how much damage I caused with my prejudice and my need to control everything around me." She looked at me next, and I found myself holding my breath as she said, "Sarah, I tormented you from the time you were a little girl, made you feel like you weren't good enough, like there was something wrong with you. When the truth is, I was jealous of how much you reminded me of what I could never be." That stopped me cold because I had never considered that her cruelty might come from jealousy. But she continued saying, "You were confident and smart and comfortable in your own skin in a way I never was. And instead of celebrating that, I tried to tear it down to make you as insecure as I felt." She turned to Emma then, and my sister seemed to shrink into herself as Grandma Rose said, "And you, dear Emma, I manipulated you in the worst way possible, taking advantage of your need to feel special and turning you against your own family. That was perhaps my greatest sin, and I am so deeply sorry." Emma started crying real tears this time as she whispered, "I let you do it. I wanted to be your favorite so badly that I betrayed everyone who really loved me for someone who was just using me, and I'm still trying to figure out why I did it. Why it seemed so important at the time. Because I made you feel special when you needed it. Most," Grandma Rose replied. "And I took advantage of that need in the cruelest way possible. You were just a child looking for approval, and I used that against you, against your whole family. And there's no excuse for that." Finally, she looked at Michael and said, "You were the smart one staying away from me as much as possible, protecting yourself from my poison, and I respect you for that. Even as it makes me realize how obvious my behavior must have been for a child to see through it so clearly." Then she turned to my father, and the look that passed between them was heavy with years of complicated history as she said, "Timothy, I failed you as a mother. I should have been supporting your family, helping you build a life filled with love. Instead, I tried to destroy it piece by piece." The silence that followed her words was deafening as we all tried to process what was happening. Whether this was real or just another act designed to manipulate us back into her web of control and dysfunction that had trapped us for so many years. My father was the first to speak, asking what brought this on, Mom. "Why now, after all this time, what changed that made you suddenly see what you've been doing to us? Because forgive me for being skeptical, but this seems very convenient. Very sudden." Grandma Rose actually smiled a sad, broken smile as she said, "After you cut me off, I was furious. I spent months telling anyone who would listen how ungrateful you all were, how I had been betrayed by my own family after everything I had done for you over the years." But then she continued, "Something interesting happened. My friend Martha, someone I've known for 40 years, told me that if all 3 of my grandchildren and my daughter-in-law had issues with me, then maybe the problem wasn't with them, but with me." And it hit me like a lightning bolt. She went on to explain that she had started seeing a therapist, something she had always mocked as weakness for people who couldn't handle their own problems, but had finally realized that she couldn't handle her problems alone and needed help to understand why she had become so bitter. The therapist helped me see that I was afraid, she said, afraid of losing my son to someone I saw as different, afraid of becoming irrelevant, afraid of a changing world that didn't look like the one I grew up in. And I let that fear turn me into someone cruel and small. I still didn't trust her completely, but I had to admit that seeking therapy was huge for someone like Grandma Rose, who had always prided herself on being tough and self-sufficient, and the fact that she was admitting to fear and weakness was almost unprecedented in my experience. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook saying, "I've been writing letters to each of you. Letters I'll probably never send, but that helped me understand the pain I caused, and I want you to know that I'm working on being better, even though I know it might be too late." My mother surprised everyone by being the first to respond, saying, "Rose, I appreciate your apology, and I can see that you're trying to change, but you have to understand that the damage you did isn't something that can be fixed with words. It will take time and consistent action to rebuild any kind of trust." Grandma Rose nodded sadly and said, "I understand, and I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. I know that's impossible. I'm just hoping that someday maybe you'll give me a chance to prove that people can change, even someone as set in their ways as me." We talked for a while longer, with each of us expressing our feelings about what had happened and what it might take to move forward, if that was even possible. And I was surprised by how rational and respectful the conversation remained, given our history of explosive confrontations. Before she left, Grandma Rose said she would continue with therapy and would respect whatever boundaries we needed to set, including staying away completely if that's what we decided was best for our family's healing process, which was another shocking admission from someone who had never respected boundaries before. After she left, we sat in stunned silence for a while before my father asked, "What do you all think? Was that real? Or was she just trying to manipulate her way back into our lives? Because honestly, I can't tell anymore. And I need your perspectives on this." Michael, ever practical, said, "I think we should wait and see actions speak louder than words. And if she's really changed, it will show in how she behaves going forward, not just in what she says when she wants something from us. So let's be cautious. but not completely closed off. Emma, still wrestling with her own guilt, said, "I want to believe she can change, because if she can't, then what does that say about me and my ability to be better than I was? But I also know how good she is at manipulation. So I don't know what to think right now." My mother, wise as always, said people can change, but it takes real work and time. We can be open to the possibility while still protecting ourselves and our family. We don't owe her anything, but we also don't have to carry hatred in our hearts if she's genuinely trying to be better. Over the next few months, we took things very slowly, meeting Grandma Rose occasionally in public places like restaurants where she had to be on her best behavior and where we could leave if things became uncomfortable, which gave us all a sense of control we hadn't had before. To my surprise, she actually did seem different, asking my mother genuine questions about her childhood in Mexico and listening to the answers without judgment or sarcastic comments, even expressing interest in learning some Spanish phrases, which would have been unthinkable before. She complimented my acceptance to college without adding any barbs about my appearance or suggesting I was too focused on academics to ever find a husband. And when I mentioned I was considering majoring in education like my parents, she said that was wonderful, and teaching was a noble profession. With Emma, she was especially careful, never trying to create a special relationship or play favorites, instead encouraging her to continue with her art and even attending one of her exhibitions where she bought a piece, not the most expensive one. Just one, she said, spoke to her, which showed a restraint we'd never seen. She made an effort with Michael, too, asking about his interests and actually listening when he talked about computer programming and his plans for the future without dismissing it as something she didn't understand or making jokes about nerds never getting dates like she would have before. The moment I really started to believe she might be changing came about 6 months after her apology, when we invited her for dinner at our house for the first time since everything had fallen apart. And she brought gifts that showed real thought and consideration for who we were as people. For my mother, she brought a beautiful hand-woven shawl from a Mexican artisan, along with a note saying she had been reading about the tradition of rebozos and thought this one was particularly beautiful, and she hoped it was appropriate, which showed a respect for my mother's culture that was entirely new. For my father, she brought an old photo album she had found while cleaning with pictures of him as a child that we had never seen before, saying she thought we might like to have them for our own family history, which was her way of acknowledging that we were a real family worthy of having our own traditions. The dinner itself went surprisingly well, with normal conversation and even some laughter, though there were still moments of awkwardness when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, but she caught herself each time apologizing and redirecting the conversation to safer ground. After dinner, as we sat around the table having coffee and dessert, Grandma Rose cleared her throat and said, "I want to thank you all for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful. And I promise to keep working on myself, to keep trying to be the grandmother and mother-in-law you deserve." My father reached over and took her hand, saying, "We're taking it one day at a time, Mom, and that's all any of us can do. We're not forgetting the past, but we're trying to move forward. And as long as you're genuinely trying to, then we can walk this path together." As I write this now, 5 years later, I can say that our family has found a new equilibrium that includes Grandma Rose, though it's very different from what any of us might have imagined. And while the scars remain, they've faded enough that they no longer define us. She still slips sometimes, old habits dying hard, and occasionally a comment will slip out that reminds us of who she used to be. But now she catches herself, apologizes sincerely, and we move forward. Because we've all learned that growth is a process, not a destination. Emma has become a successful artist using her experiences to create powerful works about identity, family, and redemption. And she and Grandma Rose have found a healthy relationship based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and favoritism, which is healing for both of them. Michael finished his computer science degree and works for a tech company in Phoenix, choosing to stay close to family. Because he says after everything we've been through, he knows the value of being present for the people who matter, even when they're imperfect. My mother has become something of a community leader. Her support group for immigrant women dealing with family discrimination has grown into a nonprofit organization that provides resources, counseling, and advocacy for those facing similar situations to what she endured. My father has done his own work in therapy, dealing with his tendency to avoid conflict and his unconscious biases that allowed him to dismiss real problems in his family. And he's become a better husband and father because of it, though he says the work is ongoing. As for me, I became a teacher like my parents, but I specialize in working with children from mixed cultural backgrounds, helping them navigate the complexities of belonging to multiple worlds, and teaching them that their diversity is a strength, not something to be ashamed of. Grandma Rose is 92 now, and while she's physically frailer, she seems spiritually stronger than she ever was when she was trying to control everything around her. And she often says that learning to let go of her prejudices gave her more than she ever lost. Our Sunday dinners include foods from both cultures now, with enchiladas sitting next to pot roast and Spanish mixing freely with English, in conversations that would have been impossible when I was that 9-year-old girl being told she was too skinny to be loved. Sometimes I think about that little girl and how much pain she endured before finding her voice and her strength. And I wish I could go back and tell her that it would get better, that the very things Grandma Rose criticized would become her greatest assets in a life fuller than she could imagine. I think about all the families out there dealing with similar dynamics where love gets twisted into control and fear manifests as cruelty. And I hope our story gives them hope that change is possible, even when it seems like the patterns are too entrenched to ever break. The truth is that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and moving forward doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. But it does mean choosing to believe that people can grow and change if they're willing to do the hard work of examining their own hearts and minds. Our family isn't perfect, and we never will be, but we're real and honest with each other now in ways we never were when we were all pretending that the elephant in the room didn't exist. And that honesty has made us stronger than we ever were when we were living in denial. I still have days when the old wounds ache, especially when I see other families who never had to deal with the kind of internal strife we faced. But I've learned that comparing our insides to other people's outsides is a recipe for misery. And everyone has their own struggles. What matters is that we survived. And we're still here. Still trying. Still growing. Still learning how to love each other better. And that's no small thing in a world where families fall apart every day over conflicts far less serious than what we faced. So when people ask me if I really believe Grandma Rose has changed, I tell them that I believe she's changing present tense, because change isn't a destination you arrive at, but a journey you commit to every day, and she's still on that journey just like the rest of us. And when they ask if I've forgiven her, I say that forgiveness is complicated and layered, and some days I have more of it than others. But I've chosen to let go of the anger that was poisoning me, because holding on to it was only hurting me, not her. The little girl who sat at that picnic table in Phoenix all those years ago being told she wasn't good enough has grown into a woman who knows her worth, and that knowledge is the greatest gift that came from surviving those painful years, even if I wouldn't wish them on anyone. Our story isn't unique in its broad strokes because families hurting each other is as old as humanity itself. But it's ours, and we've earned every bit of wisdom and growth that came from it, even if the price was higher than anyone should have to pay for love. As I finish writing this, my phone buzzes with a text from Emma sending a photo from Grandma Rose's 92nd birthday party last week, where we're all smiling. Genuine smiles around a table laden with food from multiple cultures. And I realize this is what redemption looks like. It's not perfect or pretty or tied up with a neat bow, but it's real and messy and beautiful in its imperfection. Just like families are supposed to be when they stop trying to be something they're not, and start accepting each other for who they really are. Flaws and all. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all, that love isn't about perfection or meeting someone else's standards, but about showing up imperfectly and consistently, choosing connection over control, understanding over judgment, and growth over the comfortable familiarity of old patterns. Our family found its way back from the brink not because we're special or stronger than others, but because we were willing to do the hard work of healing. And that work continues every day in small moments and choices that add up to a life worth living. So, to anyone out there dealing with family members who seem impossible to reach, who cause pain with their words and actions, who make you question your own worth, I want you to know that change is possible, but it has to come from them and you can't force it. All you can do is protect yourself. Set boundaries, speak your truth, and stay open to the possibility of redemption while never sacrificing your own well-being for someone else's potential growth. Because you matter too, and your pain is valid, even if others don't acknowledge it. And remember that family isn't just about blood, but about the people who see you for who you really are and love you. Not despite your differences, but because of them. And sometimes those people are the ones you're born to. And sometimes they're the ones you choose. Our story continues to unfold, with new chapters being written every day as we navigate life's challenges together. And while I can't say it's been easy, I can say it's been worth it. because we're no longer living in the shadow of someone else's fears, but in the light of our own truth. And that truth, however complicated and painful its origins, has set us free to be who we really are, a beautifully imperfect multicultural American family that survived its own internal civil war and came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than we ever could have been without the struggle. The 9-year-old girl who started this story would be amazed to see where we all ended up, and I like to think she would be proud of the woman she became and the family she helped save simply by refusing to let someone else's definition of worth define her own value. This is our story. Messy and meaningful, painful and powerful, ordinary and extraordinary, all at once. Just like every family's story, when you look close enough to see the human hearts beating beneath the surface of daily life, and the love that persists despite every reason not to. And in the end, isn't that what family is really about? Not the perfect holiday cards or the flawless gatherings, but the choice to keep showing up for each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because that's when love stops being just a feeling and becomes an action. So here we are. Still together. Still growing. Still learning how to love each other better. One imperfect day at a time. And if that's not a miracle worth celebrating, then I don't know what is. Because in a world full of broken things, we managed to put ourselves back together. Different than we were before, perhaps, with visible seams where the breaks used to be, but whole nonetheless. And maybe even stronger for having been broken. Because now we know what we can survive. And that knowledge gives us the courage to keep choosing love over fear every single day. As I sit here in my kitchen in Tempe, where I moved after college, the morning light filtering through the windows in that particular way that only happens in the desert, I can hear my daughter Maya asking her grandmother about the old days. And I smile at how different this conversation is from the ones I had at her age. Maya is 7 now, the same age Emma was when this all started, and she has my mother's beautiful dark hair and my father's bright blue eyes. A combination that would have sent the old Grandma Rose into fits of anxiety about racial mixing. But now just makes her great-grandmother smile and call her precious. The kitchen smells like coffee and cinnamon rolls that Mom and Grandma Rose made together this morning. A scene that would have been impossible to imagine back when Grandma Rose would rather have died than eat anything my mother cooked, let alone cook alongside her as equals. They've developed this Sunday morning tradition where they bake together, trying recipes from both cultures, and Grandma Rose has become surprisingly good at making conchas and empanadas, while my mother has mastered the art of Irish soda bread and apple pie with a lattice crust. My husband David walks in carrying our son Lucas, who's 3, and immediately demanding guama cookies in that imperious toddler way. And I watch as both grandmothers light up at his presence, competing good-naturedly over who gets to spoil him first. David is Jewish, which added another layer to our family's cultural mix, and I half expected Grandma Rose to have opinions about that. But she surprised us all by asking thoughtful questions about Jewish traditions, and even attempting to make challah for our wedding, though it came out a bit dense. Our wedding was a beautiful blend of traditions with mariachi music and Irish dancing and Jewish blessings and the breaking of the glass. And when Grandma Rose stood up to give a toast, she spoke about how love transcends all boundaries and how proud she was of the family we had all built together. I still remember the shock on some of our relatives' faces hearing those words from her mouth. But by then, they had gotten used to the new Grandma Rose, who sent them articles about unconscious bias and recommended books about immigration and shared recipes she learned from her Mexican daughter-in-law. The change hasn't been perfect or linear, and there have been setbacks along the way, like the time she accidentally used an outdated term, and then spent 20 minutes apologizing and explaining that she was still learning and asking for patience as she rewired decades of programming. Or the family dinner where she started to make a comment about mixed-race children facing challenges. And we all held our breath until she finished with, which is why it's so important that they grow up knowing they're loved and valued for exactly who they are by all sides of their family. My therapist says it's normal to still have complicated feelings about someone who hurt you, even after they've changed and grown and apologized and made amends, because trauma doesn't just disappear when someone says sorry, no matter how sincerely they mean it. Sometimes I still flinch when she reaches out to touch my arm, remembering all those pinches and criticisms. And sometimes I have to take a deep breath before family dinners, reminding myself that she's not the same person who made me feel worthless for so many years. But then I see her teaching Maya Spanish words she learned from my mother, or reading stories about strong girls who don't need to be princesses, or defending Emma's art to conservative relatives who don't understand it. And I remember that growth is possible at any age. Emma lives in San Francisco now, where she has a successful career as an art therapist using creativity to help other people process trauma and family dysfunction. And she says her own experiences give her insight into how pain can be transformed into something beautiful. She comes home for holidays, and she and Grandma Rose have long conversations about art and healing and the ways we hurt each other without meaning to, and how to break cycles that have been repeating for generations, which still amazes me given where they started. Michael married his college sweetheart, Aisha, who is Black and Muslim. And if you want to talk about testing Grandma Rose's newfound tolerance, that was it. But she rose to the occasion, learning about Ramadan and Eid, and defending their marriage to anyone who dared say anything negative. Their daughter Layla is 5 now and calls Grandma Rose Gigi, and has her wrapped around her tiny finger and watching them together. You'd never know there was a time when Grandma Rose would have been horrified by a great-grandchild who represented such a mixing of cultures. My parents are in their 60s now, and sometimes I catch them looking at each other with this deep contentment that comes from having weathered the storm together and come out the other side. And my mother says, "The best revenge against prejudice is a life well lived, surrounded by love." They retired last year and spend their time traveling to places my mother always wanted to see, but felt too self-conscious to visit when Grandma Rose's voice was always in the background, making her question whether she belonged, and now they send postcards from everywhere. The family group chat is active daily with photos and jokes and plans, and even Grandma Rose has learned to text, though her messages are often in all caps and include way too many emojis. But the effort is what counts, and we all appreciate her trying to keep up. Last month, she sent a message that just said, "I love my beautiful, diverse family," with about 17 heart emojis in different colors. And yes, it was a bit much, but it made my mother cry happy tears because she never thought she'd live to see the day. The extended family has had to adjust too, and some of them still don't quite know what to make of the new Grandma Rose who brings kimchi to potlucks because she learned to make it from Michael's mother-in-law and talks about white privilege at family reunions. But change ripples outward, and I've watched cousins who used to make thoughtless comments become more aware, and aunts and uncles who used to stay silent speak up when someone says something bigoted, and slowly the whole family culture has shifted toward acceptance. We lost some people along the way. Relatives who couldn't handle the changes and preferred the old dynamic where everyone knew their place and stayed in it. But we gained so much more in terms of authenticity and genuine connection that the trade-off was worth it. I think about the generations coming after us, Maya and Lucas and Layla and the cousins yet to be born, and how they'll grow up in a family where diversity is celebrated, not feared, where being different is seen as adding richness, not threatening some imaginary purity. They'll never know the Grandma Rose who terrorized me as a child, the one who made my mother feel like an outsider in her own home, who tried to turn sister against sister and break apart everything we held dear in the name of preserving something that never really existed. Instead, they'll know the Grandma Rose who learned and grew and changed, who proved that it's never too late to examine your beliefs and do better, who chose love over fear, even when it meant admitting she had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. Sometimes Maya asks me why some of the family photos from when I was little look so stiff and unhappy, and I try to explain in age-appropriate ways that families sometimes go through hard times. But what matters is how they choose to handle those challenges together. And when she asks if our family will always be okay, I tell her the truth that there are no guarantees in life, but that we've learned how to talk to each other, honestly, how to set boundaries, how to repair relationships when they get damaged, and how to keep choosing love, because that's the real lesson in all of this. Not that people are perfect or that families don't have problems, but that we can choose to face those problems together, to do the hard work of growth and healing, to believe in the possibility of redemption, even when it seems impossible. My phone rings and it's Emma calling from San Francisco, where it's still early. Her voice excited as she tells me about a new exhibition she's planning, focused on intergenerational trauma and healing. And would Grandma Rose be willing to be interviewed for it? The fact that she's even considering this shows how far we've all come, that she can see Grandma Rose as a full person with a complex story worth telling, not just as the villain of our family narrative, but as someone who also had to break free from the chains of her own upbringing. I tell her I'll ask, but I think Grandma Rose will say yes, because she's become surprisingly open about her journey. even starting a blog that nobody reads except for us, and a few random strangers where she writes about unlearning racism and the challenge of changing at 90. The blog is called Never Too Late to Learn, and her bio says she's a recovering racist trying to do better, and her posts are sometimes cringy in that way that old people on the internet can be, but they're sincere and thoughtful and show real self-reflection. She writes about her childhood in rural Pennsylvania, where anyone different was viewed with suspicion, and how those early lessons shaped her worldview, and how hard it is to question everything you've ever believed, but how necessary that questioning becomes when you realize you're hurting people you claim to love. One post that particularly moved me was about the day she realized she had been trying to erase my mother's culture from our family, not because she genuinely believed it was harmful, but because she was afraid of being replaced, of becoming irrelevant, of losing her son to something she didn't understand. She wrote about how fear makes us small and cruel, and how the things we do to protect ourselves from imaginary threats often create the very real losses we were trying to prevent, and how she almost lost everything that actually mattered by clinging to ideas that never served her. The comments on her posts are mostly supportive, though occasionally someone will call her out for seeking cookies for basic human decency, and she responds to those thoughtfully too, acknowledging that doing the right thing doesn't deserve special praise, but hoping her story might help other people start their own journeys. We've had family members reach out saying her blog helped them recognize their own prejudices and start working on them. And Grandma Rose says, if her mistakes can serve as a cautionary tale that helps even one family avoid what we went through, then maybe there was a purpose to all that pain. I finish my coffee and start preparing for the rest of the family to arrive for Sunday dinner, which has become a weekly tradition that anchors us all, reminding us that despite everything we've been through, we choose to keep showing up for each other. The menu today is a fusion feast with my mother's tamales and Grandma Rose's pot roast, and Emma's vegetarian option, because she went plant-based in San Francisco, and Michael's wife's injera bread, and David's mother's matzo ball soup, because why not celebrate everything we are? As I cook, I think about how food has become our love language, the way we show care and acceptance and belonging, and how different this is from those awful dinners of my childhood, where every meal was a minefield of potential criticism and cultural warfare. Maya helps me set the table, carefully placing the good china that belonged to Grandma Rose's mother, and the hand-embroidered napkins my mother brought from Mexico, and the candlesticks that were a wedding gift from David's family, creating a tableau that represents all of us. When everyone arrives, the house fills with noise and laughter, and children running between adults' legs, and conversations in multiple languages, and the controlled chaos that comes from a large family gathering where everyone actually wants to be there, which still feels like a miracle. Grandma Rose arrives with her famous potato salad, the same one I made for her birthday party all those years ago, when everything fell apart. And she makes a point of telling everyone that I taught her the recipe, which is her way of acknowledging what really happened that day. Emma brings her latest art piece to show us a mixed media sculpture about transformation that incorporates photos and objects from our family history, including some of the cruel notes Grandma Rose once left around our house, transformed now into something beautiful and meaningful. Michael sets up his laptop to video call cousins who couldn't make it in person, and soon we have family members from 3 different time zones joining our dinner, virtually making our table extend beyond the physical space into something larger and more connected. My father proposes a toast as he does every week, thanking everyone for coming and for continuing to choose family, even when it's complicated, and his voice still catches a little when he looks at my mother and says he's grateful for the life they've built together. My mother adds her own toast in Spanish and English, thanking God for second chances, and for the ability to forgive, and for children who are strong enough to break cycles, and for a mother-in-law who proved that miracles can happen at any age, which makes Grandma Rose tear up. The conversation flows naturally now, with no awkward silences or careful topic avoidance. And when someone mentions a news story about immigration or race relations, we can actually discuss it like adults who respect each other's perspectives, even when we disagree. After dinner, the kids put on a show. They've been practicing a combination of Irish step dancing that Grandma Rose taught them, and folklorico that my mother has been passing down, and some moves that are entirely their own invention, representing the future they're creating. Watching them perform, I think about how they'll never have to choose between parts of themselves the way I felt I had to. How they can be fully Mexican and Irish and American and Jewish and whatever else they are without anyone telling them it's too much or not enough. Later, as we clean up together, Grandma Rose pulls me aside and thanks me for the 1,000th time for giving her another chance, and I tell her for the 1,000th time that she earned it with her actions, and that gratitude goes both ways. because her change gave us all permission to grow. She tells me she's been thinking about her will and wants to make sure all the great-grandchildren are treated equally, regardless of how they came into the family, and that she's setting up education funds for each of them with no strings attached about what they study or where they go. This practical acknowledgement of equality means more than all the apologies somehow, because it shows she's thinking about how to support our family's future in concrete ways that will outlast her and create opportunities for all the children, not just the ones who look like her. As the evening winds down and people start heading home, I stand on my porch watching taillights disappear down the street and feeling that deep contentment that comes from a successful family gathering where everyone left fuller than they arrived, not just from food, but from connection. David comes up behind me and wraps his arms around me, asking if I'm okay. And I realize I am more than okay. I'm grateful for this life we've built on the ashes of what came before, for the family we've chosen and created and fought to preserve. Inside, I can hear my mother and Grandma Rose laughing about something as they finish the dishes, their voices blending in harmony that once seemed impossible. And I think about how the sound of women supporting each other might be the most revolutionary thing our family has achieved. Maya comes out to say goodnight and asks if Grandma Rose can tuck her in, and I say yes. Remembering all the nights I went to bed feeling worthless and wrong and knowing my daughter will never experience that from her great-grandmother, only love and acceptance. This is what redemption looks like. Not a single moment of transformation, but thousands of small choices made daily to be better than we were before, to heal what was broken, to choose love over fear and connection over control. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And as I head inside to help with bedtime and prepare for another week of living this imperfect, perfect life, I think about how lucky we are, not because we avoided pain, but because we survived it together and found something beautiful on the other side. The story continues with each new day bringing opportunities to practice what we've learned about love and acceptance and the courage it takes to change. And I know that whatever challenges come our way, we'll face them as a family, united not by blood alone, but by choice. And maybe that's the greatest gift of all, knowing that family isn't something you're stuck with, but something you choose to create and recreate every day with all its messy, beautiful, complicated humanity intact. Because that's what makes it real and worth fighting for. Looking back at that 9-year-old girl sitting at the picnic table in the blazing Arizona sun being told she wasn't enough, I want to tell her to hold on, because the very things that made her different would become her strength, and the family that seemed so broken would find its way to wholeness. Not the kind of wholeness that means perfection, but the kind that comes from acknowledging our cracks and filling them with gold, like that Japanese art where broken pottery becomes more beautiful for having been repaired, because our breaks are part of our story, not something to hide. And so we continue writing new chapters in this ongoing story of our beautifully imperfect, multicultural, multi-faith, multi-generational American family, proving every day that love is stronger than prejudice, and that change is possible, and that redemption is real. Because if we can make it through what we did and come out the other side still choosing each other, still showing up for Sunday dinners, still believing in the possibility of growth and transformation, then maybe there's hope for all the families out there struggling with their own versions of Grandma Rose. And to those families, I say hold on and keep believing, because sometimes the very people who hurt us the most can become examples of how radically love can transform a human heart, if we're brave enough to leave the door open to possibility while still protecting ourselves along the way. This is our story still being written, still unfolding, still surprising us with its twists and turns, but no longer defined by pain and division, but by the choice to heal and grow and love each other through it all, which is the only happily ever after that really matters in the end.